Are you hiring? With Indeed, you can post a job in minutes, set up screener questions, then zero in on your short list of qualified candidates using an online dashboard. Get started today at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast.
This is the Best of Golic and Wingo podcast.
Happy Thursday morning, everybody. Glad you're with us. Golic and Wingo, ESPN Radio, ESPN2. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests will join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Mike Golic Jr., Trey Wingo here with you. We finally have some resolution to what happened at Ohio State at Urban Meyer. We'll get to that in a little bit. We have the beginning of the PGA Tour playoffs, the FedEx Cup, the race for the FedEx standings, getting underway today. We will be down there tomorrow.
Yes, we will.
Heading to New Jersey as part of our fall football tour. We'll be talking about the Northern Trust as well as the Giants-Jets third preseason game. Starters final dress rehearsal. Lot to get to there. So it's going to be a very interesting morning.
It's going to be a very interesting morning. We know we have obviously football on the table. I have a game tonight, Philly at Cleveland. And then, as you mentioned, a bunch of games on Friday and Saturday. This is the dress rehearsal. That's a term we keep using as starters play the most. But probably about, a little before 9 o'clock Eastern time last night is when, the Twitter world and the TV world all was on the Ohio State Buckeyes and their board of directors and the press conference they had and everything that went down with Urban Meyer, the coach, Gene Smith, the AD. There was a whole lot to get to there. And afterward, a whole lot to talk about the way things were somewhat addressed and the way they were done.
There's just so much information to try and take in, and with last night, it becomes the difficult process of, and so much of this situation, it gets lost. Certainly, the alleged victim in all this and Courtney Smith got lost in every bit of the proceedings last night.
Yep.
But now it's the trial of the press conference versus the trial of what actually happened, because the press conference was embarrassing in a number of ways for the university and for Urban Meyer, but that's still not the heart of the issue, and so it's trying to maintain focus despite what we were given last night, and we were given a lot to assess and digest.
We certainly were, and we will get through all of that as we continue to get you ready for a Thursday morning, and let's start as we always do with what's trending. And hey, immediate dividends for the Cubs. They snapped their 3-game losing streak with an 8-2 win over the Tigers. Newly acquired second baseman Daniel Murphy, 2 for 5 with an RBI from the leadoff spot in his Cubs debut.
Yeah, we were talking, Trey, you and I before the show about this. You look at the difference in the sports.
Yeah.
In a sport like football, if you get traded, you have to kind of learn a whole new language, of calls. You're doing a lot of the same stuff, but it's just called different things. In baseball, hey, Murph, you're on a team now. You're the leadoff, 2 for 5, score a run. Good deal. Good job. I mean, you can kind of just step right in. I'm not saying baseball is easy. I think the hardest thing to do in sports is to hit a baseball, but to make the transition from one team to another in what you have to do, you basically are doing the exact same thing. You're going in the batter's box, or you're going in the field. There's no really, there's signs and stuff you have to learn that are certainly a little different, but boy, Daniel Murphy stepped in and did pretty well right off the bat.
Well, it's the ultimate plug-and-play game, and the stats and the way that advanced metrics are able to be worked out is because it's a game, despite being a team game, of isolation, where you've got all these guys that you can put in certain spots that don't necessarily require them to work in concert that much with anyone else. So you're right, it's remarkable to see someone show up like that, to the point where we had all those conversations around the All-Star break when it was Manny Machado and Bryce Harper potentially getting traded, if they could just walk over in the other dugout and go.
Yeah, you know what I loved about this? So, I love when young players try and learn from other players. David Bodie, who hit one of the 3 home runs, he talked about, I love the guy. He's a baseball.
Talking about Murphy.
Talking about, Bodie was talking about Murphy.
Right.
I love the guy, a baseball rat just like us. I got to talk with him some in the 9th inning, just scratching the surface of his hitting and approach to hitting. So you got a guy who wants to kind of soak up some information from a veteran. I kind of like that. Yeah. I don't think you see that enough.
It isn't. And we were talking about that. And look, obviously it's a team game in the sense that you're all pulling for one goal, but it really, baseball, if you think about it, if you boil down to it, is a one-on-one battle. For most of the entire game, it is the pitcher against the batter. Now there are shifts and all. I get all that.
It's pitchers versus batters.
That's exactly right. And you can't just plug and play like one game and go, okay, you're playing center now for a different team.
Yeah,
whole different set of circumstances. So it is amazing how much different it is depending on what sport you're talking about. But again, the Cubs got him because they thought they needed offense and hadn't been scoring a ton of runs. They get 8 in his first win, and he went 2 for 5, as we said, with that RBI. Well, when you don't throw at him, these good things happen to Ronald Acuna Jr. He hit his 6th leadoff home run of the season, and Freddie Freeman had a tie-breaking sac fly in the 8th to lift the Braves to a 3-game sweep of the Pirates.
Yeah, I mean, pretty incredible for him. 6th leadoff home run of the season, tied for second, but he didn't even get to the leadoff spot until July 20th. Amazing what he has done. Now, he was doing this too much, and then he got hit, didn't he? Who was it, Jose Urena threw at him?
Yep, too many. I'm telling you, you want to tread lightly, Acuna, because too many leadoff home runs. We saw how this goes.
Who does Jose play for? The Miami Marlins. Do you know who Atlanta plays next?
Oh.
They're in Miami.
Collision course.
Play the Marlins. You know he's getting plunked again.
Oh,
he better go up there with all the body armor he
can. Get the full Barry Bonds outfit.
Unbelievable.
Just walk up with half of a suit of armor on that side and get ready to go. Get ready for the fisticuffs, because you have to imagine also there's got to be some retribution coming, right?
Sure.
We heard about this. There's that long memory there. Whenever it's coming, it's the
unwritten rules, Junior.
It's the old revenge line. You won't know when it's going to happen. You don't know where, but it's coming.
He should just show up in a jousting outfit, right? That would be the best way to do it. The Braves have a 3-game lead over the slumping Phillies, who have lost 4 straight in the NL East. Tiger begins his first FedEx Cup playoff run in 5 years at 7:54 this morning from the 9th tee in round 1 of the Northern Trust at Ridgewood Country Club in Paramus, New Jersey. Woods will be paired with Mark Leishman and Tommy Fleetwood.
So the last time you mentioned he played in the FedEx Cup playoff was in 2013. Was he tied for 22nd? I believe it was at the Tour Championship. His last victory in a FedEx Cup event came in the 2009 BMW Championship. He did play this course. The last time, I should say, he played this course was 2010, the Barclays, at Ridgewood Country Club. He shot an opening round 65 and led the field in fairways hit. Something doesn't compute there in either one of those.
Whoa.
He doesn't shoot 65s
You're
in the
telling
opening
me.
round, and he's 134th, I believe, off the tee. You can't find the fairway, so it was a little different in 2010, obviously.
Yeah, think about that last round that we saw from him at the PGA Championships with the front 9. He was over the goose egg on fairways. So we're looking forward to that. We're looking forward to, hopefully you, when you buy your tickets to go watch Tiger Woods and these other guys play, come by and watch us tomorrow morning.
There you go.
Yes.
I'm actually going today. I'm going to go check it out today. My old teammate in with the Eagles, Jeff Fiegels. I'm going to see him. He's going to be on the show tomorrow there. We're going to go watch a little golf today.
And, of course, we got some other news with Tiger. That match is now official. Thanksgiving weekend, Tiger and Phil, Shadow Creek. We'll get into that a little bit later. But Tiger Woods back in the FedEx playoffs. Tiger Woods making the switch to being back in the FedEx playoffs. Making the switch brought to you by Pennzoil Synthetics. Taking synthetic motor oil performance to a whole new level. Make the switch to Pennzoil Synthetics today. And, of course, the press conference that everyone's going to be talking about today, what they thought of it, what Ohio State did, and maybe what Ohio State didn't do. Head coach Urban Meyer has been suspended 3 games without pay. The school announced Wednesday night. Athletic director Gene Smith also suspended without pay from August 31st through September 16th, the day after the 3rd game of Ohio State's season. This all is because of what Urban Meyer was aware of and what he did and what he didn't do, and what Gene Smith, the athletic director, was aware of and what he did and didn't do, involving the allegations of domestic abuse by former wide receivers coach Zach Smith against his wife, Courtney Smith, who was fired again earlier this year, and everything that came out of that horrendous Big Ten Media Day appearance by Urban Meyer at Ohio State.
You know, I mean, we're going to try and have some orderly fashion to this, because as Mike mentioned just a few minutes ago, there is a lot going on here, and there's a lot to go through as far as why they did the suspension, what went on there, to the optics of that presser, which right off, the bat, everybody wanted to see, obviously, what was going to happen to the head coach at Ohio State. Gene Smith was there. That was, I think, to most of Buckeye Nation, that was ancillary. It was, what's happening to Urban? Is Urban back, or is Urban not going to be back? So there's what happened within it, which we're going to get into. But off the bat, I'll say, and I said it live, we were talking all night about this, I thought Urban came off horribly in this press conference. I mean, just he basically, it's like someone handed him the sheet of paper. He couldn't have read it fast enough. He sounded like us at times, not speaking well, having to start sentences over, and then couldn't have finished it quick enough and couldn't have got back to his seat quick enough. There was nothing to it. I mean, and this is kind of what you do at times, is you break down I heard there were so many people talking afterward saying it would have been nice if he just walked up there, maybe showed a little emotion. And I thought to myself, he wasn't showing emotion because he doesn't think he did anything wrong. Yep. He, to me, was stunned. He was suspended. I think he absolutely felt he was going to be back on the practice field today, coaching again. And from what we're hearing, there were many people who involved in that situation who it was going to go that way as well, that thought that was going to happen. He wanted to know, in my opinion, wanted no business being up there, thought no way he should be suspended for this, and he acted like it.
Yeah, and this is the sort of press conference game because in a lot of ways, he's sort of right based on what they decided and what they found, that it should have been cut and dry. And you said this yesterday, and the more I thought about it, you were right the way this has been assessed. If he was guilty of not reporting things the way that he was supposed to, should have been fired. And if he wasn't, he should have been back on the field. Right. And so this middle ground created frustration. They had been in the room deliberating, they said, for 10 hours before this. So I'm sure some of that ancillary frustration there. But the bottom line is we judge the press conference, which again is so secondary in all of this. But it still reflects poorly on the university for some things we found out that they didn't know in this process, and it reflects poorly on Urban Meyer in a way that you have to care about when you're the head coach and you're the face of the university, because we don't afford a lot of these same, things to everyone else, the same leeway when they get up and embarrass themselves in front of a microphone like that, and that's what happened.
And sorry, Trey, but because I started with I thought he looked bad in the presser, and that is the secondary part of it. The main part of it is if he, in fact, went up and he and Gene Smith talked about this, and then the fault then, to me, was Gene Smith not going to compliance because it didn't go to compliance. It's the next guy up going to compliance, so we're going to hear a ton of sound about it. My thought was either he's back on the field or he's fired.
Right.
Not this suspended thing, because let's just flat out be honest here. If this was a 500 coach, he'd have been gone.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt.
Been gone. So the way this went and the information we got, my thought out of this from the standpoint of Urban Meyer, the head coach, probably shouldn't even have been suspended.
See, you're exactly right. So let's put this in some parameter for those that maybe didn't see the press conference. Here's first and foremost, Mary Jo White, the lead investigator in the Ohio State investigation, and here's what she said and the conclusions in a nutshell. Granted, it's a 23-page document. There's a lot to get to, but she tried to sort of summarize exactly how they got to the conclusions that they did.
Coach Meyer was, in fact, aware of the 2015 law enforcement investigation into allegations of domestic violence by Zach Smith. He was informed of that investigation by Athletic Director Gene Smith in the fall of 2015. And both Coach Meyer and Athletic Director Gene Smith regularly monitored the progress of that investigation for a period of months, although the investigation did not ultimately result in any charges or an arrest. Coach Meyer and AD Gene Smith, although acting in good faith, did not report the investigation of Zach Smith for domestic violence in 2015 to compliance as we believe they should have. Although law enforcement had not brought charges at the time that Coach Meyer and A.D. Smith became aware of the investigation, the compliance function would have been in the best position to assess whether to conduct an internal investigation into the allegations had they known about them.
Okay, there's a lot to get into on that statement alone. And again, this all goes back to at that Big Ten Media Day, Urban Meyer, when Zach Smith had just been fired, a few days earlier, right?
Yep.
Was asked about, did you know about the 2015 thing? And he said, no. I don't even know what that story is. That's ridiculous. Blah 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 blah. So in that one soundbite there from Mary Jo White, basically they're saying, yeah, they both knew about it. But then it's weird. He was informed of it by Gene Smith.
Yeah.
Okay, the athletic director. So did he? Because then in his amended statement, after he admitted that he didn't prepare himself, well, he lied.
Yeah.
When he lied at Big Ten Media Day. You can say whatever you want. He lied at Big Ten Media Day.
Didn't intentionally lie, according to everyone last night.
Okay. So now we're getting to the point now, because then he said in his amendment, say, I kicked it upstairs. Well, did you kick it upstairs, or did they say to you, hey, we're aware of this? So that statement alone leads to much more confusion, correct?
That leads to a lot of confusion for me, because you're right. This has been about, did Urban Meyer report it up the chain of command? And as I talk to people who I trust who have worked in compliance, that's the way it's supposed to go, is he's supposed to report it.
And that's exactly what he said he did at Florida.
But it's interesting here because in the summaries of all this, we hear it lumped together that Urban Meyer and Gene Smith didn't report this to compliance. There seemed to be at least an effort for both of them to say, we're going to monitor this on our own. And so it was interesting to hear Mary Jo say that he was fired. Mary Jo White, excuse me. That he was, in this situation, didn't report this accurately in a timely manner, however you want to say it, and Urban Meyer was suspended for that, when we hear more and more about why Zach Smith was fired. And Urban Meyer saying that he was aware of what had happened in 2015. He knew about it clearly here. But then when the trespassing charge came up and Urban Meyer wasn't made aware of in the right time the restraining order that was in play there, all of a sudden, because Zach Smith didn't report something accurately and in a timely fashion, Zach Smith was fired. And you can say these are far apart and that obviously what Zach Smith did at the core of this is far worse than anything else in this. But at the end of the day, the action that got him fired is essentially the same action that got Urban Meyer a 3-game suspension. So how are we to believe this is about anything other than wins and losses?
Yeah, you're right, because in that presser, Urban Meyer did say, I told the coaches, you keep me abreast of all situations at all times. I mean, which is basically what the university was saying that you and Gene Smith didn't do to compliance. Now, I do say there is a chain of command, and would it not fall more on Gene Smith to then go to compliance? And it doesn't seem like they have to walk in, arm around each other to compliance and say we have this issue. You follow the chain. But it does sound odd that you're right. And that was the final straw. There was the trespassing, and then there was, there's a restraining order. You didn't keep me up on that. You didn't tell me what was going on. Well, you're fired. I still go back. Again, there's so many tentacles to this that for this guy, Zach Smith, in my opinion, and what I hear from other people, they didn't think he was a very good coach, and he was there because he was Earl Bruce's grandkid.
Correct.
And once, unfortunately, Earl Bruce passed away, that basically the ties to Zach Smith were basically over, and you were almost looking for a reason to fire him. Yeah. And given last night's press conference, you'd never know what the reason Zach Smith was fired for, that he did anything to his ex-wife, because it was never brought up.
Right. So there's so much to dive into here. We mentioned the press conference, how Urban felt like, or it sounded like he was just robotic at this point. So let's listen to some of the things that Urban read from that statement and the way he read them.
I did a poor job at Media Day. It's a big reason why we're here today. I was not being as complete and as accurate as I should have been at Media Day and afterward. But there is no intent to mislead. My role is to set a good example. In this instant, I did not live up to the university's standards. The suspensions are tough, but I fully accept them. I wish I could go back and make the different decisions, but I can't.
Okay. Again, if you didn't see it, I mean, it was just completely.
It was delivered in the way that I would do a read that I'm looking down at and then finding out, they changed it this time. Right. Because it looked like it was clearly a statement that he hadn't written, clearly a statement he wanted no part of being with, and he wore all of that disinterest and defiance in a way that was so off-putting and something where you're already fighting against so much. You went out of your way, it seemed, to make it off-putting, and to do that at the expense of everyone else in the room who had bent over backwards through this process to find a way to keep you.
And then along those lines, again, we're talking about the presser and how he looked in this as he's sitting there, and who had so many tweets out. One of our colleagues tweeted out that it's amazing head coaches are so laser focused on everything when everything's going right for them. Then when it's going wrong, how many times did Urban Meyer say, "Could you repeat that question? What was that? I mean, seriously? Yeah. Have you ever heard a head coach who controls everything be so like, wait, what was that question? Wait, I didn't hear that. What was it again? I was blown away by that.
And again, I think this part is important as well. Zach Smith is the grandson of Earl Bruce, as you said, legendary Ohio State football coach, a mentor to Urban Meyer, and in his somewhat prepared remarks that he read a piece of paper from, he alluded to that as being a part of this situation as well.
I followed my heart, not my head. I fell short in pursuing full information because at each juncture, I gave Zach Smith the benefit of the doubt. As I reflect, my loyalty to his grandfather, Earl Bruce, who was my mentor and like a father to me, likely impacted how I treated Zach over the years. I did not know everything about Zach Smith, which was what Zach Smith was doing, and I'm pleased that the report made this very clear. However, I should have demanded more from him and recognized red flags. I needed to show more care and concern for the entirety of the situation and the people involved. I should have been more demanding of him in the same way I am of my players, other staff members, and myself. I should have done more and I am sorry for that.
Okay.
I mean, listen, there again, as we said, a lot to get into, but Mike, in that this 23-page report, he has a paragraph in there that he'll read to you in a few minutes that completely gives Ohio State the out to do exactly what they did. And that's what this, I don't know how many people are going to end up reading this report, but when you read it and you hear what Mike is going to read, you're going to say, oh, okay, well, that's how they pulled this one off.
Golic
and Wingo.
and Wingo.
Trey Wingo and Mike Golic Sr. Golic and Wingo with you, ESPN Radio and ESPN2. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. All phone guests join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. You can get in touch with us, 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed at Golic and Wingo, or you can call in 860-506-5505, and we want to hear from you on this story. What did you think of A, how Ohio State handled the situation, and B, how Urban Meyer handled himself in that press conference? And
we're getting all kinds of tweets. I'll start with one from Damian. We've lost sight of what a head football coach is responsible for. We hold them accountable for the behind-the-closed-door accusations of his staff with no legal charges. This could change the landscape of college football if accusations are all you need. Damian, to a point, I mean, I think there are some people that agree with you. It doesn't matter about legal. You can't just wait for the police to do something. They needed to do exactly what Mary Jo White said. Tell compliance. That's what he had to do. And
it's what he did in Florida.
It's what he did in Florida. It's not his job to investigate legal charges or no legal charges. If this comes on his desk, his job is to send it to the next person, which he did in 2009, and which it sounds like, to me anyway, that Gene Smith, the AD, knew about it. So from my side of it, there is the part of it was on the next higher up person's desk. And then it didn't go to compliance where it needed to go. So, Damian, there's part of the tweet. I get what you're saying, but there is a responsibility when something comes across the head coach's desk or becomes apparent to him that he needs to send it to the next level, which it seems, Mike, that he did do to a point.
And that's even become cloudy now. The bottom line is this, and you hear an Urban Meyer statement and everything about this. What do we always get preached to in the world of sports, and especially in football? It's accountability from leadership. There is a glaring lack of accountability here to the point where, at the very least in all of this, when Urban Meyer gets back on the field, if I'm ever preached to by any member of that coaching staff about accountability, I don't know how, if you're a player, you don't burst out laughing in that meeting. I don't know how you don't laugh in the face of everyone involved in that, because there's zero accountability happening here to any of the true issues at the center of this, even in a way that as a leader you would expect from the people involved in here. So that much we can always talk about: college football, the farce of amateurism, the leaders of men stuff. Save it. We're here to win games, and we're here to win a lot of them at Ohio State.
What do we always say? The more talented you are, the more you're going to get away with. There's a sliding scale of justice in almost any sporting situation. We hear that a lot in terms of players, and we're hearing that a lot in terms of coaches now. And this is all part of Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, no contracts. So the issue, if we can try and boil it down to one thing here, the issue is, what did he know and how did he handle it, right? That part is even confusing out of this 23-page document that they presented in the press conference, because once again, here is Mary Jo White, the Ohio State lead investigator, seemingly talking in circles about that particular event.
We ultimately did not conclude that Coach Meyer deliberately lied during his comments at Big Ten Media Days on July 24th, 2018. He has consistently maintained that he did not recall in July 2018 what he knew in 2015 regarding the domestic violence investigation of Zach Smith by law enforcement. And we credit that Coach Meyer, in answering reporters' questions on July 24th, was closely focused on erroneous media reports that Zach Smith had been arrested on felony charges in 2015, which Coach Meyer had determined the night before not to have occurred. But his answers swept more broadly than the falsely reported arrest, and Coach Meyer falsely stated that he lacked knowledge of all relevant events regarding alleged domestic violence by Zach Smith in 2015. While those denials were plainly not accurate, Coach Meyer did not, in our view, deliberately lie.
Okay. Just hold on a minute here, okay? What they're I think the road they're trying to go down is, when he said that, it was about these false, erroneous reports of a felony charge against Zach Smith. Okay, that's fine. But then you say, we found out he didn't do this. Then he falsely stated, but then you follow that up with, but he didn't really do it. He didn't deliberately do it when he falsely stated.
Do we need to pull out like the definition of a lie?
Come on.
Would falsely stated be part of that?
It's amazing. And how many things does this guy have to falsely state? Because when you go through the report, there's a bunch of these. Coach Meyer maintained that shortly after the 2009 arrest of Zach Smith at Florida, that Zach and Courtney Smith met with him in an office to inform him that the arrest of Zach had been based on incorrect information provided to authorities by Courtney Smith. We find it more than likely, this is now the committee saying this, we find it more than likely that only Zach Smith met with Coach Meyer in 2009, and that Courtney Smith likely did not recant her allegations of abuse at that time to Urban Meyer, although it is clear that she decided not to pursue charges. So basically, Urban Meyer says one thing, it's another. Again, Shelley Meyer also maintains that she did not relay Courtney Smith's expression of fear at the allegations of abuse, some of those text message exchanges that we saw, to Urban Meyer at the time because she had doubts about the veracity of Courtney Smith's statement. We believe it likely, this again the committee, that Shelley and Urban had at least some communication about these allegations in late 2015 and were concerned about them. Yeah, I mean, the list just keeps going on of things in here that, well, he said and that we believe as a committee are not true, and yet we somehow keep going back to believing.
So the committee thinks that Shelley Meyer did, in fact, share some of that stuff with Urban Meyer, and we know we're going to hear a soundbite where Urban Meyer says basically that didn't happen. What all the misremembering, this was the most interesting thing that I wanted to have you read that people aren't going to know about right now in this report, is about why he doesn't remember some of those things. And this gives, I think, Ohio State their reason to say, well, we're just going to suspend and we're not going to fire.
Yeah, so Matt Schick, one of our colleagues here who went through a lot of these and pulled a lot of the clips that I've read for you. They're on his Twitter feed. But this one, we accept that in July 2018.
This is the board.
This is the board's findings. This is the board saying this in their report, in the 23-page document. We accept that in July 2018, Coach Meyer was deeply absorbed in football season and wanted to focus on football Big Ten Media Days. The firing of Zach Smith the day before, the first time Meyer had fired a coach, was also on his mind, as was the erroneous Media Day report of a felony arrest of Zach Smith in 2015. Again, that's what they're saying. It wasn't a felony arrest. That's what he was saying was incorrect. We also learned during the investigation that Coach Meyer sometimes has significant memory issues in other situations where he had prior extensive knowledge of events. He has also periodically taken medicine that can negatively impair his memory, concentration, and focus. All these factors need to be considered and weighed in assessing Coach Meyer's mindset on July 24th. The minute I read that, I said, they've got all they need to basically excuse away whatever they want to.
And I'm just curious if those memory losses and not having laser focus, is he going to be able to recall things at a press conference after a game, exactly what happened in the third quarter? Because I'm pretty sure he would.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that when you had read that, I had not gone through the report. You had gone through the report. I was like, wow, okay, that gives them their, well, even when he has extensive knowledge on something, sometimes it's a little hazy for him, and that is their out. That is absolutely an out. I should not saying that was their out, but it certainly could be used as an out for them.
The thing that I keep going back to, and we've talked about this before, if he did what he was supposed to do, kick it up the chain of command, then should he have been suspended? Because if that's when you play these bites from the lead investigator, again, he was aware of it as he was told by Gene Smith. So what did he, now, did he kick it up to Gene Smith, or did Gene Smith bring it to him? That seems to be some of this that still doesn't make sense here.
The bottom line to me is, what choice did Ohio State have here? Because like you said, it should have been cut and dry, but when we listen to Ryan Smith, our legal analyst, it sounds like they had a choice, and they made one based on the information they had.
And here is exactly what you're talking about. Ryan Smith, our legal analyst, breaking it down simply.
It's a slap on the wrist, because you look at what they had available to them. And I respect the committee's thoroughness in all of this, looking through everything, finding all the information, but they reported in their findings that he failed to report what happened, that he deliberately lied. These are things that in his contract could have led him to be fired for cause, which means he wouldn't get paid.
Now, the one thing I'll say is Ryan used the word that is deliberately lied. We just heard Mary Jo White say, we don't think he deliberately lied. They're basically saying he falsely stated, but he didn't deliberately. I mean, but again, this is what Ryan Smith does, and Mary Jo White, listen, she was the head of the Security Exchange Commission. These are smart people who know how to use words, okay? So, well, Ryan Smith is saying deliberately lied. Mary Jo White is saying falsely stated. They're saying that for a reason. So, I mean, we can sit there and laugh at it, but they're saying it for a reason to continually say, we don't think he deliberately lied, and they're going to keep pounding their fist and saying that while a lot of us keep laughing at it. But that's the term they're going to use to give them the ability to just suspend and not fire. Or fire with cause, actually.
I'm reading through this as the show goes along, the legal documents, and probably will for most of the rest of the day, because it's fascinating just to see all of this that makes it sound. And the more and more you look, and the more of that legalese language that you hear makes it seem like there was something worth hiding here. Right? Like, through all of this, I just can't read this and not get that suspicion. Like, man, if this was all as simple as you reported things the right way and went about it the right way, this wouldn't be as complicated as it seems to be right now.
And that is Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. Coming up through all of this that goes back to what happened at Big Ten Media Day and the history between Zach Smith and Urban Meyer. There's one name that was hardly mentioned last night, and that's the alleged victim, Courtney Smith.
Golic.
I tell you what, a great sports night last night, no doubt about it.
And Wingo.
What a day, what a show, what a time.
1, 2, 3, 4.
When it comes to hiring, you don't have time to waste. You need help getting to your short list of qualified candidates fast. That's why you need Indeed.com. Post a job in minutes, set up screener questions, then zero in on qualified candidates using an intuitive online dashboard. And when you need to hire fast, accelerate your results with sponsored jobs. New users can try for free at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms, conditions, and quality standards apply.
Support for the Golic and Wingo Show podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Let's talk about buying homes for a minute. Because of rising interest rates, there's a lot of unpredictability when it comes to buying a home these days. It's causing a whole lot of anxiety with folks. Well, our friends at Quicken Loans are doing something about it. They're calling it the power buying process, and here's how it works. Quicken Loans will verify your income, assets, and credit in less than 24 hours to give you a verified approval. This gives you the strength of a cash buyer. Then once you're verified, you qualify for their all-new exclusive Rate Shield approval. First, they lock your rate for up to 90 days while you shop. Now here's the best part. If rates go up, your rate stays the same. But if rates go down, your rate also drops. You win either way. It's the kind of thinking you'd expect from America's largest mortgage lender. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Golic. Rate Shield approval only valid on certain 30-year purchase transactions. Additional conditions or exclusions may apply. Based on Quicken Loans data in comparison to public data record. Equal housing lender. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLS ConsumerAccess.org number 3030.
All right, we continue. Golic and Wingo here reminding you that we'll be at the Northern Trust in Paramus, New Jersey, Friday. Grab your tickets and come watch our show before taking in a day of championship golf. We'll be there for the first of the FedEx playoffs in the PGA Tour, also for our fall football tour, Week 3 preseason game, Jets and Giants. But again, a lot of today's show is going to be about what went down last night at Ohio State. Urban Meyer and Athletic Director Gene Smith both getting that 3-game suspension for the way they handled the allegations of domestic abuse by former wide receiver coach Zach Smith against his ex-wife, Courtney Smith. And the name Courtney Smith never came up in any of this situation at that Ohio State press conference until a reporter asked Urban Meyer specifically about Courtney Smith.
What message do you have for Courtney Smith?
Well, I have a message for everyone involved in this. I'm sorry that we're in this situation. And I'm just sorry we're in this situation.
What about Shelley's text messages? Why were you not concerned from her messages about this situation?
I was not aware of Shelley's text messages at the time.
Okay, for those that are not aware, this started with Brett McMurphy's report. Basically, he had text from Courtney Smith saying, texting to Shelley Meyer saying, look, this is what happened. And Shelley in response said, I'm going to have to tell Urban about this. And Courtney Smith said, you should. He said he was not aware of that. However, Junior, in the report.
So in page 8 of this report, again, part of this is Urban denying that he had any knowledge. Shelley Meyer in this report, this is the committee in their report saying
Correct.
This. Shelley Meyer also maintains that she did not relay Courtney Smith's expression of fear or allegations of abuse, including photographs to Urban Meyer at the time, because she had doubts about the veracity of Courtney Smith's allegations. Later on, Coach Meyer also does not recall any discussion with Shelley Meyer about either her or Courtney Smith's concerns of abuse. Given the closeness of their relationship and Shelley's concerns, we believe it is likely that Shelley and Urban Meyer had at least some communication about these allegations in late 2015 and were concerned about them. So the committee's saying, we don't believe you.
Yeah, and that if there is one thing I 1,000% don't believe is that Urban Meyer did not know about those texts. That this long marriage and close relationship, and also back in 2009, this couple, the Meyer couple, took Courtney and Zach under their wing after Zach was arrested, and then it wasn't put in the arrest report about domestic violence when Courtney Smith was pregnant. Took them under their wing said we need counseling to help them, and then something like this came up again, and we're to think that Shelley Meyer didn't share this with Urban? I will never. And think of your own relationships here. Just put yourself in this situation and think that your spouse wouldn't share this with you, especially when you had a situation where you went through this before together as a couple to help this same couple. That is something I will never, ever, ever believe.
Urban Meyer also saying last night that everything he knows about Zach Smith is mostly work-related, despite the fact of that, having worked with him for 11 years, of calling his grandfather the second most important male figure in your life behind your own dad.
Yeah.
All very believable.
Well, yeah. When you listen, let's listen to this soundbite again, because I think it's important.
What message do you have for Courtney Smith?
Well, I have a message for everyone involved in this. I'm sorry that we're in this situation, and I'm just sorry we're in this situation.
What about Shelley's text messages? Why were you not concerned from her messages about this situation?
I was not aware of Shelley's text messages at the time.
That sounds like legal parsing.
Yeah.
I was not aware of Shelley's text messages at that time. That's a way of saying, hey, maybe I didn't see the text. We might have talked in generalities about what might have been going down, but I specifically didn't see those texts. That sounds like it's a legal parsing more than an acknowledgement of, yeah, I knew what was going on.
Yeah, I just flat out don't believe that one. I just do not believe, given the prior relationship in this situation in 2009 with this couple, that the texts weren't shared. I can't.
You know who else doesn't believe it? The independent committee that did the 23-page report on this. Like the number of times where they said, we believe the opposite of what Urban Meyer told them in this report.
They believe they lied.
Yes.
They believe that Urban and Shelley lied. Right?
Yes.
I mean, that's what you have to take from that. Again, I'm not sitting here saying now you're fired because of that, but this whole not lying thing, I mean, of the other terms they use,
not
falsely
deliberately
stated. Yeah. I mean, they're basically saying Urban and Shelley lied.
You're choosing to believe a lot about a person who lied to you a few times in this by your own admission. Is baffling.
Yep.
Golic and Wingo.
It was all sort of one big giant Jell-O mold.
It's very interesting where that went.
We're delighted to be joined from Columbus by Dan Murphy, our ESPN Big Ten reporter. Dan, first and foremost, you're there. What has been the reaction in Columbus about that press conference last night?
Good morning, guys. You know, Ed Ashoff is also here with us. He had a chance to run around and talk to some students last night. He said it was a fairly measured, smart group of kids that he talked to. We actually had one woman just run by us here as we were setting up our shot and said, Ohio State hates women. So I think there is a little bit of a pushback even here right in Columbus about the way that everything went down last night.
Dan, so I'm really interested. We've been trying to get to the crux of what happened at the press conference last night and kind of the timeline of events. As we've seen and read through the documents here, what can you tell us about what was said last night as far as the order of when things were reported, when Urban Meyer knew what he did, who he told, and how that process and that crux of this went down?
Yeah, so I think the 2015 incident sounds like it was passed on from a Title IX director who learned about it through Ohio State Police. That got filtered to Gene Smith, who then passed that message on to Zach Smith and Urban Meyer. There was some question about whether they should have done more to report that to compliance at the time and how seriously they took those allegations. And while there's a lot of attention on what happened in 2015 and 2009, rightfully so, because those are probably the most serious allegations, I thought it was interesting that these weren't the only instances. There was a crescendo of a lot of reasons that you would potentially fire a coach that Urban Meyer overlooked when it came to Zach Smith. There were lewd photos at a White House. There was a stay in rehab. There was bad job performance. He went to a strip club with a high school football coach while he was on a recruiting trip. All of those things are something that might get a guy fired. Meyer was willing to overlook all of those, and he said it was mostly because of the relationship he had with Zach Smith's grandfather, Earl Bruce, someone he considered his mentor. He said that he led with his heart instead of his head, and that was one of the biggest mistakes, I guess, that Urban Meyer actually copped to last night.
Talking to Dan Murphy, our ESPN Big Ten reporter. And a lot of times, Dan, we sit there and read body language or listen to how people are doing things. And as you watched and listened in that presser last night, we all gave our thoughts on how Urban Meyer came off. What were your thoughts, just personally, of watching him and how you felt he dealt with it and how he thought, what he felt of the whole situation?
I think the whole room last night was tense and frankly tired after a day that lasted almost 12 hours worth of deliberating and trying to figure out how they were going to move forward. I think it was pretty clear when we asked Urban Meyer directly if he felt he needed to be suspended for this. He said in a pretty terse way that he supported the president's decision, which you can read into that whatever you'd like there. But it did seem like there was some stiffness between the three men that were up on the podium taking questions, and that Urban Meyer wasn't entirely thrilled to be there last night.
Well, yeah, that part came through loud and clear. There's no question about that. Dan Murphy with us, our ESPN Big Ten reporter, is in Columbus talking about what happened at Ohio State. You know, Dan, as we're trying to read through the document, the 23-page document that the somewhat independent committee put out there, it seems to be boiling down to this, does it not? If Urban had just been less false, for lack of a better term, on Big Ten Media Day, we wouldn't be where we are today, correct?
That's a very good possibility. I think that the way he handled that back in Chicago, one, led to a report on August 1st that really led to him being put on leave eventually, and the fact that they say he misrepresented himself. They were really wearing out the thesaurus to find ways not to say directly lied by the end of this thing in the past month. But they said he didn't deliberately lie. There were some interesting things in that report, and we should mention that folks here in Columbus didn't see that full report until hours after that press conference. We didn't have an opportunity to ask anybody at Ohio State follow-up questions about that report, despite the fact that it was likely done hours before the press conference actually took place. But despite saying he didn't deliberately lie, they did find that there were reasons to doubt that even during the investigation when they were interviewing him, he was less than forthcoming in a couple key instances.
You're talking to Dan Murphy, ESPN Big Ten reporter, and that to me was jarring and telling, Dan, was the amount of times it seemed Urban Meyer said one thing in this investigation, and then right after that in a paragraph, the committee would say, we find basically the opposite in all of this. But as we do try and stick with what's important at the center of this, what was the, I guess, takeaway from the media in the room at just how long it took and the way it took Courtney Smith to enter this conversation last night?
Yeah, I mean, it was a long day in general, and I think that was one of the bigger takeaways, is the fact that really there was no discussion about domestic violence, about the bigger issue, about why it's important to believe and take those type of allegations seriously, or what they learned from this experience because of that. It wasn't until late in the press conference that we asked about Courtney Smith and gave Urban Meyer, after he apologized directly to Buckeye Nation, a chance to say something to her. And instead of talking directly to her, he said what he wanted to say to everybody involved was that he was sorry they're involved in this situation.
Dan, as far as Courtney Smith, I wondered as I was listening to this thing, and she wasn't even brought up until the end, and that was by someone asking the question, as Mike just said. Is there part of you that thinks, I started reading some of this on Twitter, and certainly I know you have to be careful of that, of maybe people at Ohio State don't really think a whole lot happened there, that haven't been any charges against Zach Smith. He says he didn't hit her, and that people at Ohio State maybe believe that.
Well, I think Shelley and Urban Meyer both said in that report pretty plainly that they had reasons to doubt just how serious or the veracity of some of the allegations that Courtney Smith was making. That's clearly been a stance that Zach Smith and his lawyer have held throughout this whole process. But Zach Smith did say that there was a toxic relationship there, and it seems that even if they had reasons to doubt her, I think it's pretty clearly established at this point that it's important to report those things even if you're not totally sure they're true at that point, and that was really where the failing was.
Again, so that situation has played itself out. Now, we know what Urban Meyer and Gene Smith, the athletic director, Dan, are suspended for the first 3 games. Ryan Day is going to be the head football coach at Ohio State for those first 3 games and going forward. It has been since Urban Meyer's been on paid administrative leave. The logistics now of how this is going to work. One of the things that has been clear, and I think rightfully so, is that the players on the team have been completely sort of left out of this situation because this has nothing to do with them. They're just trying to focus on football. Do we know anything more about how the logistics of all this are going to play out during this first 3-game suspension?
Yeah, and the players have been sort of cordoned off from answering any questions, and for the time being, that's going to continue, it seems. Urban Meyer won't be allowed to be involved in any practices or the team until September 3rd, I believe, which is the Monday after that season opening game against Oregon State. He'll then be allowed to be part of practices and film sessions and all the other stuff a coach is involved with, but he won't be there for the next 2 games against Rutgers. And then really the bigger one that he'll be missing is at Jerry World in Week 3 against TCU. It will be, again, Ryan Day leading the team at that point. He's getting help, obviously. Day is from 2 former head coaches that are on the staff, offensive coordinator Kevin Wilson and defensive coordinator Greg Schiano.
All right, Dan, great job. Dan Murphy, our Big Ten reporter, coming to us from Columbus, Ohio. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Golic and Wingo.
Let's not expect too much. There's only one person out there that's expecting way too much out of this guy too early. We know who that is. It's his father.
Ricky always wanted to play baseball in the majors. He was playing catch before he could walk, practically lived in the batting cages. He was behind home plate more than he was home. And one day, after all that hard work, he found himself walking into a Major League Baseball stadium. After buying a ticket at the front gate, a nosebleed seat obscured by a pole, but he was in there. No, Ricky never did play in the big leagues, but he did switch his car insurance to Geico, proud partner of Major League Baseball, which saved him a lot. So, all in all, things were good.
All right, Golic and Wingo with you on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Lots to get to today. Just a few minutes, Tiger Woods will be teeing it up at the FedEx Cup playoff event at the Northern Trust. First time since 2013. He tees off at 7:54. You can see that on ESPN Plus, by the way. And the feature group, Tiger tees off with Mark Leishman and Tommy Fleetwood. 8:05, Dustin Johnson, Justin Thomas, and Brooks. Oh, there's going to be a lot of swagger in that group. There'll be a lot of there'll be a lot of sauntering down the fairway between DJ and Brooks. In fact, that's going to be a side wager. Who saunters better down the fairway? Will it be Dustin Johnson or Brooks Koepka? And we'll get into that a little bit later. And the event that is now officially official with Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods. But again, we're still doing a deep dive and just reading into the 23-page document that the committee presented to the board at Ohio State, and there continue to be some really interesting things that are coming out of this.
Yeah, I really encourage people. It's 23 pages long, but every page you are learning something different about this, and draw your own conclusions from it. I'm certainly not a legal expert, but when you read this, it's really hard to look at this, and the more I look at it, the 3-game suspension that we're saying, it should be cut and dry. It should have been either he was guilty and should be fired, or he is not culpable in this and should be retained. The more it looks like it, based on this, the amount of things in here that the committee in their findings in writing seems to doubt about Urban Meyer brought up in this process, you wonder if this is a frustration suspension where it's like, we can't actually fire you, but hell if we don't want to.
Well, then they didn't give us everything we wanted last night in the presser, right?
Oh, no, that presser fell short.
That's the thing. All of a sudden, this was supposed to be, we're going to let you know everything. We're going to be transparent. And basically it was, he's suspended for the procedure that wasn't followed. And we just laid out the procedure, which was kind of reverse. The Title IX coordinator finding out, then telling the AD Gene Smith, and then telling Urban Meyer. So that procedure, what was Urban supposed to do at that point in knowing about it? So if you want to say you're frustrated, say there were a lot of inconsistencies we saw, and he's going to be suspended for some of those. But when you come out and say he was suspended for that, and then you say what that is, you're like, well, wait a minute. That doesn't sound like he needed to do any more in that particular situation you're suspending him for.
Failure to take sufficient management action relating to Zach Smith's misconduct. That is what they listed in the summary of why he was fired in all this. And it's suspended. Suspended in all this, excuse me. Urban Meyer suspended, Zach Smith fired well before this. But it's interesting. Another instance, as I'm getting through this document, of a place where the investigating committee is shocked here. And this is another clip that Matt Schick, our colleague here, pulled last night on Twitter. Upon the report first came out, Brett McMurphy's report about this, when it first came out, Brian Voltolini, who's the director of football operations, was at practice on the field with Urban Meyer and went to speak to him, commenting that this is, quote, a bad article. The two discussed at that time whether the media could get access to Coach Meyer's phone and specifically discuss how to adjust the settings on Meyer's phone so text messages older than 1 year would be deleted. Now, in the committee's review of this, and they reviewed 10,000 text messages from Urban Meyer and 40,000 e-documents, and they said, our record revealed no messages older than 1 year, indicating that at the time it was obtained by OSU on August 2nd, so the day after that conversation, Meyer's phone was set to retain text messages for only that year. We can't determine, however, whether Coach's phone was set to retain messages for a year in response to that August 1 media report or at some time earlier. It is nonetheless concerning, and again, this is the committee who was led by Mary Jo White, who spoke last night. It is nonetheless concerning that his first reaction to a negative media piece exposing his knowledge of the 2015-16 law enforcement investigation surrounding Zach Smith was to worry about getting media... Excuse me, sorry, I want to read this the right way. It's nonetheless concerning that his first reaction to a negative media piece exposing his knowledge of the 2015-2016 law enforcement investigation was to worry about the media getting access to information and discussing how to delete messages older than a year. So they looked at that and said, man, that smells foul. They looked at that and said, this doesn't make sense to us. This feels wrong.
Look, at the end of the day, it comes down, I think if we're being honest, it comes down to this. Had this been a guy who had been there for 3 or 4 years and had maybe needed a big breakout season this year to be around, he'd be gone. But because it's Urban Meyer, and his record speaks for itself in terms of wins and losses, they were willing to try and do something else.
And not only this, if Urban Meyer had taken all of these and just been honest about the nature of this situation
from the
at the
Big Ten
beginning,
Media Day,
said, I knew about all this. He was a guy that was important to me because of who his grandfather was. I tried to help him along the way with my wife. And finally, the cumulative effect of this was just too much. I wonder how different this would have looked.
I think a lot different.
Golic.
Makes me want to vomit and then punch you square in the face.
And Wingo.
Oh, he's saucy today.
Time for the love it or shove it. You ready? Everything has nuance. Nothing happens in black and white. See, Bubba's going to hate me again, but I think there's nuance here. You guys have to embrace the nuance in life. Oh, wait, hold on. There's 2 questions there. Life is not black and white. It's mostly gray.
Just answer the question.
No, well, which one do you want me to answer? No, you're loving that. You're loving the statement.
You love it or shove it. It's a statement, and then you love it or shove it. This is the first time playing.
No, it's not, and it should probably be the last time playing.
All right.
SportsCenter is brought to you by DraftKings. DraftKings hosting fantasy football contest for week one with $2 million up for grabs. Get the app or go to DraftKings.com now. Use the code GOLIC to play free with your first deposit, minimum $5. Deposit is required. Eligibility restrictions do apply. Check out DraftKings.com for details.
Love it or shove it time, brought to you by Granger. You want to read it, Bubba?
Let's do it. Ohio State.
No.
What?
Love it or shove it is brought to you by.
You want the end.
Okay, I was going to let you a little more Granger love, but you didn't want to do it.
What are you doing?
Just waiting.
We had
for you
such
to
a good
things.
one last week. You understood the game.
He did better in the game, didn't he?
Go.
What do you
speak words?
Ohio State should have either fired Urban Meyer or not suspended him at all. Love it or shove it.
You know, came into the morning after the presser last night thinking that, and then in reading this 23-page report. Now,
I encourage everybody to read the report. It's on
it is
ESPN.com.
Incredible. The reason they gave for the suspension was for him and Gene Smith was the fact that their procedures with the information, which I don't know how much you can put on Urban, for that specific thing. Now, if you want to go through this report and look at some of the inaccuracies and in my opinion, the flat out lies that they call false statements that are lies, then I could say, okay, you know what? There is some gray area on being more worried about scrubbing his emails from a year to, I believe, lying about knowing about the text from his wife. So I think I could see a 3-game suspension. So I think I'll shove this.
I'm going to shove it because I'm more confused after reading the report than I was before it. And it seems to be like the report itself contradicts itself 400 or 500 times. I'm in no way saying that Urban Meyer is not without fault here. I want to be clear about that. But reading this report, they seem to be talking themselves in circles.
Boy, they really
I have no idea what's going on, so I'm going to shove it.
The Match is the golf event on the 2018 calendar that you're most looking forward to. Love it or shove it?
To me, it would be the Ryder Cup, without question. You got the FedEx playoffs going on right now. You have certainly the match between Tiger and Phil on Thanksgiving, but for me, it's a Ryder Cup at the end of September in France. I'd love that.
Look, I am all in for the Tiger-Phil match. I'm going to buy it on pay-per-view. I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. Nothing to me tops the Ryder Cup. It is the greatest sporting event I like to watch every 2 years, so I have to shove that.
The Vikings won the NFL offseason. Love it or shove it?
They added Kirk Cousins, Sheldon Richardson. They just added safety George Iloka. They extended Danielle Hunter, Eric Kendricks, and Stephon Diggs. And
get Dalvin Cook back. They did lose some players
they get
in the
Michael
last
Gallup?
preseason game. Well, see, there you go.
So no.
As far as winning the offseason, which of course means nothing, I think I'll love it. I think they had a great offseason. I would agree with that for a meaningless win.
Yeah, because you know who won many off seasons in the 2000s? Washington.
Yeah.
But they didn't win games in the playoffs. But I think I'll love it. I'll love the fact that they believe they've done everything they need to get to a Super Bowl. The Rams are close with Brandon Cooks and Ndamukong Suh, but they still don't have Aaron Donald signed, so that's a big red flag for me at this point. So I'm going to love it with the Vikings.
The Jets and Ravens will both keep 3 quarterbacks on their 53-man roster. Love it or shove it?
Wow. Man, there's part of me that almost looks like you start Teddy Bridgewater playing well enough to be the starter, but we know what's going on there. I'm going to say that they will in one place. I think
so. You got to shove it that it was only one place.
I'm going to shove it because I think it just won in one place, and I think it could be Baltimore because I don't think they're going to think Lamar Jackson is ready to be the backup there.
I'm with you there. I think we said earlier I'm going to shove it as well because I think it's going to be a split. I think that we all thought when the preseason began that Robert Griffin III was auditioning for another team, and I think the audition for Lamar Jackson has gone so poorly that I think that they're going to keep 3 there. I think Teddy Bridgewater is eventually going to get traded.
I think so as well.
Darnold and Josh
I think they're going to see the value of that go up, and teams want to jump on it, and he'll get traded and have a chance to do something somewhere.
This has been the Best of Golic and Wingo podcast. You can listen or subscribe on the ESPN app, Apple Podcasts, or just ask your smart speaker to play Golic and Wingo. Plus, you can check the guys out live weekday mornings from 6 to 10 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on ESPN News.